Hello ladies, and welcome to Night In with Joy Irungu, where we keep it real and authentic and we turn our pain into power. Remember, we say when you are healed, go and heal someone else. And today we are joined by a friend who's a recent friend called Beryl, and her story is so powerful. I just don't even know what to say, but you know, these are those stories when you listen to, you feel inspired, motivated, and you're like, okay, sawa basi, if somebody can go through this and still heal and come out of it strong and powerful, then what is this thing that God cannot do, you know? And karibu sana, Beryl.
Thank you very
for
much.
accepting to come, accepting to be the commitment of being authentic and sharing your story. And just give us a brief intro of who Beryl really is.
Okay, thank you very much, Joy. My name is Beryl Achieng Ogutu. I am a born-again Christian.
Amen.
I'm very passionate about Christ.
Amen.
I'm an addictions professional. I have trained and I'm an international certified professional. And I am a survivor of rape and also an addiction, a person who's recovering from substance use disorder. Yes.
So you have all the titles, and you know, I just don't know. I know from the titles, behind that there's a story.
Yes, there is.
There is a story.
Yes.
And you just mentioned that you're a survivor of rape. I don't know if you can talk to us about that.
Okay. Basically, it is a story within a story, because first came my addiction, then came the rape. I grew up in a, let me call it a dysfunctional family. My dad and mom were consumers of alcohol. What happened is that my dad provided for us everything, but he wasn't there for us emotionally. As I look at him at the moment, I view him differently, because when I was a child, I really did not identify so much with my father, and because he was angry most of the time, and I felt that he did not know how to show us love as a father would, because providing the basic necessities is just not enough. So what I can say is that our family was dysfunctional. There was a lot of domestic violence. As I said, my dad was angry, and as a result, my mom would be beaten from time to time, and that made our family. I grew up being very fearful, because you don't know what will happen the next time. So I would say that I would go out sometimes and see how the other children would relate with their fathers. And I was like, no, you family, you're abnormal, because I knew how our family is, you know. But anyway, as I said, my dad and mom were consumers of alcohol, so there was alcohol around the house. So I started experimenting on alcohol at a very early age. Just going to the fridge, sipping here and there, discovering that first the feeling was not nice, but as I continued, I got used to it. So when I was around 12 years old, my dad died, and we were left with my mom. My mom was a housewife, and because she didn't have that enough exposure when it comes to working, she was left to fend for us the way she knew. She was compensated a little bit of money, but the money soon ran out. So by the time I was finishing class 8, I didn't have, my mom didn't have money to take me to Form 1. So when children were going back to school, I had to remain in the estate to hang around. And that is how I got introduced to jam session. So jam session at that time People were going to Florida, 2000, and New York, those places in town. And there were not so much restrictions when it comes to selling alcohol to young people, because I remember we would go and buy Smirnoff Ice. The first alcohol I ever bought myself was Smirnoff Ice Red. I can't forget. And I graduated to smoking cigarettes. That was at the age of 14. So that was behind, obviously, my mother's back. She did not know that. So we'd go to jam session, we'd drink and smoke, and then I'd come back home. So I would say, fortunately, because I was a very bright girl at school, I got a sponsor who took me to a school in Western Province. And I didn't join school like the other people. Third term, struggled so much to catch up with the other students, but eventually I did. I thank God. Generally, we have good genes in our family, very intelligent, so I caught up very fast. And let's say Form 2 was quite stable. Then came in the struggles, because I don't know what happened to my sponsor, but she couldn't continue paying for me. So being chased in and out of school, I had to go back to my grandmother's home. Or I didn't say. When my father died, as he said, we moved. We were living as a middle-class family, very comfortable. I remember those days. Those are in 1990, 1992. I was born in 1984. We would have all these basic things that, all the bicycles and everything that children would have at that time. So we moved from the class that we normally lived, to a different class, because now my dad was not around. So it was so much of a culture shock to us. So when I went to Western Province to school, I had to go and live with my grandma, which was also not easy. So when I went to Eregi Girls, as I said, in and out, no school fees. I eventually had to go back home. My uncle decided to pay for me for school fees. But in between, anyway, at that time, in between the breaks and the holidays, I would still drink and smoke, but not that seriously. So I joined a school at Nyanza Province, and then come when I was doing my Form 4, my mom fell sick. I did not know about it. I knew about it when she was passing on. After I'd finished my Form 4, that is when I heard that my mom was sick. So when I'd finished my Form 4, I think a couple of days after, my mom passed on. So when she passed on, I was shocked. I had a very close relationship with her. When we were growing up, she was very tough, you know, these African mothers, slippers, kuchapwa, and everything. But when my father died, she somehow akachil kidogo, akacha kukua mkali hivyo. So we somehow developed a relationship. So after we buried her, I was a very angry young lady. Because one, I felt my family had not told me the truth about the seriousness of my mother's illness, and I felt that I would have been given a chance to see her before she passed on. So I just decided to rebel. I did all the nasty things that a teenager will do, drinking sprees, running away from the house in the middle of the night. I gave my grandmother a very hard time. So I will do that, and it was just a way of dealing with the anger that I was feeling on the inside, because that was the time that I'd started at least knowing what it feels to have a relationship with a normal relationship with a parent. So what made the situation worse is one day when we went for a drinking, when we had gone for a drinking spree, we got arrested. So I spent a night in the police station. As a result, each and every of my family member knew that now Susan has a problem. So at that time, my big sister was the one who was taking care of her. God rest her soul in peace. She took over. She had to take over as the responsibility of our guardian when my father and mother passed on. She did so at a very early age, and I believe it was also overwhelming for her because she was at that time in campus. She stepped in, talked to me and told me, Susan, now you have to really think about your life and focus about your life. And at that time I was like, when people tell you, hey, you're going towards the right direction, you're like, nah, there's nothing you're telling me. I did listen to her, but not that much. So I continued with the bad behavior, and one of my uncles decided to take me. I went to stay with him at Ngong town. It was good because he was also a very good uncle to me. We had a very good relationship. And things came back to normal because he was born again. So I had to conform to his lifestyle and everything. And I also somehow learned more and more about God. So let me just retrogress kidogo. I grew up in a Christian background. My dad and mom would ensure that we'd go to church or would go to Bible study and all this the normal activities that young children go through as pertaining to spirituality. So my uncle, with a close relationship, he got married. And when he got married, I felt that I no longer had a place in his life. Because at that time I really needed that feeling and sense of belonging. And I found it in him. So when another person came in, I felt this place I no longer needed here. So I somehow decided to distance myself from my uncle, and I went to stay with one of my aunties. That was immediately after Form 4. I did not perform well in school on my Form 4 because of the up and down from one school to the next, and also the fact that I was not serious with my education. It reached a point that I was like, to hell with this. Whatever will come, will come. Yeah. So I got a sponsorship with one of the churches. They enrolled me to a college as I was staying with my auntie. Things were well for some time until I started having friction with my auntie. And as a result, I ran away from her home. I met one of my girlfriends. Any time ya kole, I would still drink from time to time. I met one of my girlfriends who told me, you know what, your auntie, your relatives, when your mom and dad die, when you don't have parents, people will not treat you the way you would deserve to be treated. So it's important that you find a life of your own. So I went out there. She introduced me to some of the ladies. I was very naive. Yes, despite the fact I was drinking, I was very naive to the world. I didn't know what was happening out there. So I just packed my bags, went to her house, stayed for 2 weeks, and then later on she introduced me to some ladies. So that is where my life began. I was pimped up. I remember I hadn't even put a weave in my life.
That was the first time.
Nikapelekwa, nikatengelezwa nywele, went, bought all the skimpy dresses that people will buy. And I was introduced to the nightlife, going out and just meeting men, drinking, and, sponsors and stuff. And deep down myself, I knew that whatever I was doing was not right. Because, as I said, I grew up in a Christian background. And I went to Bible study, and I knew about God, and I knew about living a life of purity. I knew about sin and stuff. So I knew what I was doing was not right. So every time I would go to meet those men, I would drink myself silly. So it was just a way of coping with the whole situation. So the more I drank, the more I did not know that I was progressing in addiction. So it went on like that. I was new to the scene. Every man would want to be with me. all the alcohol and the money and the designer perfumes and the very fancy clothes and everything. So for me, life was okay. Life was all about sleeping and partying at night and going to eat and continuing to drink. Yani life ilikuwa tu kukunywa, kulala na kununua nguo na kutengeleza nywele. But I didn't know that the more I drank, the more I was progressing in addiction. So it reached a point, you know, as addicts, you start, your life starts becoming unmanageable. So ile unaenda out, unajipata umelia, umetapika, umefanya madrama. Sasa watu wanaanza kujidistance na wewe. So the more people start distancing themselves from you, the more you start looking for people to identify with. So you move to a lower class of people, you know, people who will look at you as the celeb, as the person who mwenye ako huko juu, because umesha watu huko wanaona this lady is too noisy, she's not classy because she drinks so much, anatapika everyone and anafanya all these other kinds of things. So nikaendelea hivyo. Before nilianza in addiction, I would drink all these classy drinks. What? I saw myself going down the drain. Nikaanza kukunywa kina. That time sikuwa nakunywanga kina Tusker na Pilsner. Nikajipata nimeanza kukunywa Tusker na Pilsner. Nikajipata nimeenda Allsops. Nikajipata nimeenda kukunywa Citizen. Those small.
Citizen is a drink?
Yes, those small bottled drinks. Nikatoka Citizen, nikajipata nimeanza kukunywa Kenya Ken. Woi, venye nilianza kukunywa Kenya Ken, hapo ndo niliona maneno imeharibika. Because at that time, I believe a whole bottle of 750 ml was around 250, if I'm not wrong. Nikajipata nimetoka kunywa Kenya Ken, nimeenda sasa kukunywa kina Napoleon Naps. So hapo, sasa niko kwa klasi ya watu wa lowest of the lowest. Tuka move, I was living with my friends, we moved, I went to live in Pangani. And as a result, also mingling with all the wrong kind of people, I got introduced to weed. I started smoking weed and mogoka and a Chavez.
A Chavez?
Yes.
Is still mogoka?
It's not related to niakina tobacco and everything.
Oh, okay.
So I got introduced to all those drugs. And for me, that was my life. That was the new normal. So I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would do is just go and look for drugs. And ilifika time yenye nimekuwa so dysfunctional and unmanageable that I can't even be able to go out there and look for money for my drinking. So I'll just hang around the estate. Nilikuwa na hang around Pango, nenda kwa bar. Ikafika point sasa nilikuwa sasa nakunywa inaitwa aje mitini dawa. Nikasonga chini nikaanza kukunywa mitini dawa. So things got worse. They did not get better. Kushikana tu na all the wrong people. Kwenda kwa bar, kuibia watu, kufanya all these funny things that people do to get alcohol. And at some point nika hit bottom kabisa. Kuhit bottom ilifika point yenye I'd started developing complications health-wise. Nilikuwa nimeanza experience withdrawals. When I don't drink, I would hear voices and I would see spiders in the house, auditory hallucinations and all these other kind of things. And for me just to survive, I had to ensure that I have my weed or my alcohol or my mogoka or my anything that I would use at that time to just keep away the bad feeling that I was in. So tukafungiwa nyumba Pangani and I had to go and look for somewhere to live. My big sister did not know. At that time, my big sister was working at Kenya Airways. She heard that I was looking for a place to stay. She was very happy. She thought I was the small sister she knew back then. She didn't know that I had completely changed. And when she saw me, she was very excited. I myself had decided, you want to quit. You look at your life and you ask yourself, nimefikaje hapa? Because you know your potential. You know the kind of person that you were before the addiction set in and life became what it became. So I told myself, because for the sake of my sister and my family, I'm going to quit drinking and I'm going to quit using. So a day before I went to her house, I cleaned up. She was living in Westlands at that time. I cleaned up and I decided, sikonyo, wacha tu niende, I start a new life. I went to my sister's place the first day. The second day, I stayed for a week sober. That was the longest I stayed after. I tried to be good, but it couldn't just hack. That time I wasn't doing anything. I was idle in the house, and all the guilt and the shame of the kind of life I lived in the past. And I was looking at my life and was saying I have not amounted to anything. All those feelings made alcohol to be very appealing again. And I remember my sister would give me money. I would some pocket money here and there, and I would save the money. Na nikaanza kwenda backstreet Odeon kununua gauge. So because hizo pombe nataka ziezi kaupatikana Westi, nilikuwa na savingi naenda kununua ba. So nilikuwa na changa 50 naenda huko Odeon. Nenda nanunua second generation drinks za 50 kama 10. Sio ni punch. Narudi nazisunda kwa how everywhere. Sitting room, bedroom, choo. So me, when I'm just around the house, I'm hovering around the house getting high. So when I'm in the kitchen, I'm high. When I'm in the toilet, I'm high.
And your sister doesn't notice?
She did not know that I was drinking in the house. And it became so worse. It became so bad that ikafika point, as much as you try to control yourself, it reaches a point when you drink so much that everybody around you knows that you are drinking. So when we moved from Westlands, zile chupa zilipatikana huko, ndo watu walijua I have a drinking problem. Yeah? Ndio watu walijua I have a drinking problem. So tukahama tukaenda Doni kwenda. I was the new girl. Everybody wanted to be around me. They didn't know I was an alcoholic, so I was able to sustain my habit for some time. Kukaka, unajua sasa pia una pesa, you're in a new place. People have realized that uni ule demule wa kawaida wa kukunywa kwa bar na kuomba pombe. Sasa hii umesha lose class yako. Nikaanza kufikiria ways of how I can sustain my addiction. So hapo ndo nikaanza kuiba kwa how. Pole. My sister would bring us clothes she was working at Kenya, so she would travel a lot. She would bring us clothes, perfumes and everything. So I started selling my things. Nikauza, ikafika point I had a friction with my big sister. In the process, nikahepa, nikaenda ghetto. Na nakumbuka nikihepa ghetto, very funny story. My sister had told me, you have to look for a job. And you have to look for a job like now. Nikamwambia sawa. Nikatoka na CV. CV ilikuwa na certificates. My sister was very educated. Ilikuwa na certificates zake na tu certificate twangu kwa twangu tuwili twa nyuma. Twa primary na secondary na computer. Nikatoka na hiyo whole file. Nikasema, wacha niende kuhustle job. Si nikafika stage nikajiambiwa acha kwanza niende nikatoe lock ya keg ya 25. Ndo niende nipate confidence nikienda interview. So when I went to the bar, I met a lady who was selling there, and she told me, "Hey, madam, what are you doing in the pub right now and you're very dressed?" Nikamwambia, nimepitia tu because I'm going somewhere. Akaniambia, "Hey," we started conversing. So in the process of our conversation, she told me, "By the way, you look very educated." That is how I became my big sister. I showed her the file. I told her Vivian Ogutu and what. And she was so impressed. And she told me, "I'm going to make you the manager of my bars." She did not know who she was introducing in her life. And that is how I got a job in a bar as the manager. Nikakuwa employed. The first day nilikuwa employed, by saa 6 nilikuwa nimekunywa, nime blackout. Hata sikuwa najijua na mimi ni manager. So this woman, so hawa ni wale wa alcoholic kwa kawaida. But because I'd entertained so many people in that place, and it was in the ghetto, and guys had heard, hey, there's another educated lady in a certain bar huko, hebu tuende Korea. Hiyo siku she made sales. So as much as she kicked me out that day, the next day she came to look for me and she told me, because my customers wamekuwa wakikuja na wakikulizia sana, and some of them get disappointed and they go back, let's strike a deal. You work for me, ensure that you stay sober up to this time, and then ukimaliza job uko mbele unaweza kunywa. So nikaendelea hivyo kukunywa, kukuwa dysfunctional. I dropped cheo mpaka nikakuwa waiter. Kukuwa waiter nikaanza kufanya all these wrong things. Being able to sustain yourself, joining all the wrong cliques of people to rob people and do all these kind of things. And I would say huko kwa ghetto ndo ilikuwa my first attempt. Somebody almost raped me and it shook me so much. It wasn't successful. It was in the middle of the night. Nimetoka kukunywa na nikafuatwa na nikanyongwa, but in the process of kunyongwa mtu akatokea and I was saved. And it shook me so much that I decided, let me just go back home. So when I went back home, nikajaribu kukuwa sober, but I couldn't. I continued with the alcohol and the smoking and the weed. And later on tukaanza kukuwa na friction with my big sister. So you know, it reaches a point you're so hopeless. You're wondering what is wrong with you. Because Joy, when you're an addict, your drug of choice is the only thing you can think about. Showering is not a priority. Eating is not a priority. You'll wake up in the morning and you'll tell yourself, hey, I need to shower. But kwanza unajiambocha nikatoe lock, nirudi. Ukienda kutoa lock unakunywa mpaka unasahau. You come back home very drunk, you can't even shower. You have to sleep again. So ukilala tena uamke, ujiambie, hey, wacha nikatoe lock. So you will find I would go like that even for 2 weeks without showering. Just like that. So you neglect yourself completely. You don't, I remember there's another time my sister in the morning, oh God rest her soul in peace, she told me that alikuwa na 1,000 bob between ye na poverty. Susan is hizo bonds zake za forced abstinence. Akaniita, by the way, he was a very nice person when I was sober. Akaniita akaniambia, Suzy, hebu enda kanunue maziwa na bread, na hii ndio fare yangu mbele na nyuma. Alafu that is how I went and drank and came back after 2 weeks. It makes you completely, you become so selfish that you cannot have meaningful relationships. My family did not matter to me at that time. And you know, at that point, my big sister was wondering, this is not the Suzy I know. At home, I'm called Suzy. This is not the Beryl I know. I know the kind of the sister that I grew up with, because I was very intelligent. At one point of my life, I was the only black young girl who participated in the Queen Elizabeth debate battle at that time. And she knew all these things, and she would look at me and she would wonder what went wrong. So how she was trying to find an explanation to what was happening to me. And me at that time also, I'm asking myself, kwani am I bewitched? What is wrong with me? Why can't I stay without alcohol? You have become the talk of the estate. People look at you and they're like, hey, and then you know that time my sister is working at Kenya Airways and they know her. So when they're identifying somebody, they're identifying her with me. Na saa hiyo mimi nimetoka ghetto, nimelewa, mimi ni mchafu, niko na slippers ya blue na red. Yani nywele, you're not taking care of yourself, you know. So it was also an embarrassment to my family. So one day we clashed with my sister. I almost committed suicide. Jumped out of a 5-story building. So she was lucky enough to find me, and she saved me. At that point, she decided, Apana, I need to take you somewhere else. And she took me back to my auntie in Kibera. Me at that point, I was so hopeless, Joy. I really did not want to leave, so I decided to drink to die. So I went to my auntie's place. She welcomed me back. My auntie's place, Joy, I would say, unfortunately, our neighbor was a changa. Alikuwa nini wa changa.
Sasa amekupeleka the wrong place.
Sasa mimi nikaendelea. And at some point of my life, I used to look down on people wenye walikuwa nakunywa changa. Nilikuwa naonanga nasema, mimi changa. Sikujua mimi ndo nitakuwa customer wa changa. Nilikuwa nanunua jiki ya 70, nikipata so. Hiyo ni jiki ya 70 yenye tani last na ninunue tu fegi twangu. That is how I would budget. So I continued drinking, and in the process tukaclash na auntie yangu. Nikahepa home, sasa nikaanza ku move from one home to the next. You know, one thing about addicts is that how venye nimesema, they are so dysfunctional, they can't live with people. So nilikuwa nenda one place, watu wanajaribu kuniweka, naona it's impossible to live with this young girl. So I moved from one home to the next. To some extent, I got married with another weird person huko ghetto. Nimewekwa ati sasa. And I remember it was such a pathetic, the condition was so pathetic that I was, you know, you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, what has your life amounted to? But because you're in that situation, you just have to work with what is there. So nika move around, I didn't have a place to stay. Nilikuwa nikienda mali nitapata ndio nitalala na such kind of things. So ikafika mali pia niliharibia jina yangu, auntie yangu jina sana huko Kibera. It was in Kibera. When I went back, my auntie decided, I'm returning you back to your sister. I went back to my sister's place. I found that they had completely progressed. My sister had progressed. I was looking at them and I was admiring what had happened in their lives, and at the same time I'm looking at my life and I'm saying, mimi kwani nilifanyia nini Mungu? Mbona mimi siendelee? Let me just give you a small story of what happened when I went. When I went back home that day, I found my sister going to the salon, and she told me, you know what? In this house, people, watu hawakai hivi tu, lazima wafanye kitu, lazima they have to work and nini. And I felt so bad because I was in my sister's house and yet I felt like a stranger. Yeah. When I left my auntie's house, I told myself that I was going to try everything to stay sober. But nikafika kwa sistangu nikapatiwa conditions. Nikasema hapana, I can't do it. She had a portable bar at the side. Nalikuanga mtu wa kustock ma vodka, ma wine and everything. Nikaangalia nikasema okay, this is where I've reached. Ni sawa. Alienda salon. Niliingia kwa hiyo portable bar nikachukua vodka ya Blue Label. Nilikunywa bottoms up. Nikabakisha, nikaongezea maji na nika blackout.
Kwa chupa.
So when I went back home, when I slept, nikapata, nili blackout, venye niliamka nikapata sistangu amelia. They tried to wake me up. I was all wet. They were wondering what is wrong with me. Me, when I woke up, my sister told me, you know what, Susan, I have had enough. Even mom and dad know, they know that I have tried. I have tried to help you. I have reached my end. What you're going to do is I'm going to give you money. You go to your uncle. Go and stay with him. Mimi nimefika mwisho. So me alikuwa ananiambia atanipatia 1,000 bob. What I was planning is that I was going to take that 1,000 bob, go to the bar, ninunue jik, changa, ni rent kanyumba kangu ka 2-3 days as I look for a bar job. I've been a barmaid in my life. At some point in my life, I was a barmaid. I have helped people peddle weed and stuff. So those are things that I did in my life. So later on, my sister venye alimake your decision akasema hapana, siwezi kukupatia do. Let me wait for my taxi driver to drop to your uncle's home. So the taxi driver took longer than he was supposed to take. Fortunately, her friend came in and they had a very long discussion. And the friend told her, have you ever asked your sister whether she has a drinking problem? Have you ever tried to understand her? Because as you're talking about her, this is not the kind of person who will say, that would purpose to drink the way she drinks. And they called me, and I really cried that day, and I told them, me, I do not want to drink. I want to quit. I want to have a better life. And after so much discussions, we decided to go and seek a counselor, go and see a counselor. We went to Maisha House. I met a lady called Esther, and I tried to explain. Remember that session I told her I'm bewitched? Nimerogwa, sijui what, sijui niko na black, sijui what. And then she was looking at me and just laughing. And then she told me, you know what, Susan, you're just suffering from the disease of addiction and you need rehab. You need to go to rehab, and I know you're going to be helped there. So I was taken to a rehabilitation center. I stayed there for 3 months. It was tough at first, but I was willing to try out anything that will make me better. After that, I was trained to become a recovery coach. In the process, I had a client who I was very close to, and the client passed on. And because I really did not know how to manage that loss at that time, I abused prescription medication. So I got into abusing prescription medication. Kichini chini, people did not know about it. I did it for 2 years. And eventually, all hell broke loose. I met somebody, we got engaged, and the relationship was not working for me. You know, it reaches a point when your life is so hopeless that you're trying to look for yourself in somebody else. And when that person cannot give you what you need, you become very angry and frustrated. So I was trying to make this guy my drug of choice. I was trying to make this person make me feel good. And this person was not able to do that.